Welcome, everyone. Welcome to this webinar on how to improve your hiring experience for candidates and the hiring team. It's a topic that's very close to my heart. Let me introduce myself. My name is Mark. I'm the head of talent at Cronofy. As you will have heard earlier, I live in Newcastle and a big football fan. We also have the amazing Erica joining us as well. Erica, can I let you introduce yourself?
Of course. Yes. Hi. So my name is Erica Wallace, and I'm a talent acquisition manager here at Bamboo. I've been with Bamboo a little over 2 years now, and before that, I've always worked in talent acquisition about 12 or 13 years now of just being in this field. But I love it's been so amazing. I think with Bamboo, it's a very talent acquisition friendly environment. We have such a great culture, and there's a lot of freedom and a lot of autonomy to really have a great experience. And I think I'm so lucky and fortunate to be part of this team.
Great. And I'm sure we'll be diving into that culture in a little bit as well over this conversation. So again, a big welcome to everyone who's attended today. We really want this, when we were planning this, we really wanted this to be a conversation, not an interview Q&A style webinar. We do have some topics that Eric and I are going to be discussing, all related to the hiring experience for candidates and the hiring team. But we thought it'd be worthwhile starting kind of setting the scene a little bit. So Erica, would you mind telling us a little bit about the setup of the current TA function at the minute? So when we're talking about candidate and hiring team experience, we've got the context as well.
I'm sorry. Yes, for just for Bamboo or for
Yeah, that's right. For Bamboo, that'd be really helpful. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So right now at Bamboo, we have specialized teams that kind of focus on different areas of hiring, and our we have a very, I think, very process oriented environment. And one of the things that we really focus on is having an outstanding candidate experience. So to have that set up, we have recruiters who are very knowledgeable about the teams that they're recruiting for, and we almost have them like kind of immerse themselves into that team so that they can really understand what those hiring managers are looking for. And then we have like a commitment to making sure that the candidate experience is moving along quickly. And I think that that's one of the ways where automation can really help benefit that quickly moving pace. And that's what I think is so important for all of us when we're looking at what can we do to improve the candidate experience. I think automating what can be automated so that you can have things moving at a reasonable pace and getting back to candidates. I'm sorry, I don't know if that was what you were referring to, but
No, it's good. It's really, really helpful to set the scene, really.
yeah.
And it sounds like a really, really busy function. Let me, I guess, interesting for the context of the listeners as
Yeah.
well. So on a slightly different scale with us, I'm the only person in TA or recruitment at Cronofy. We have 6 hiring managers across our departments, and we're hiring a lot right now. So kind of similar to yourself, but for very different reasons. My priorities are a really, really good experience. But it's interesting to hear you talk about the process, because my priority is about trying to make things as lightweight as possible for our managers, because I'm sure you know their time is super, super precious. You touched on automation before, so just before we get into the detail, it's worth saying to everyone we're going to cover a few themes today. We'll talk about automation, we'll talk about the human element, and we want to focus on the importance of feedback and trust. I also need to ask, because JK has just reminded me, that you're welcome to ask any questions in the Q&A section, and we'll try and get around to them at the end, or if I can answer them as we go, I'll try my best as well. But I think probably let's start, Erica, with the candidate experience. And I want to ask you, what is your definition of the candidate experience?
Yes, it's such a good question because there's so many buzzwords, and I don't love having a lot of corporate speak and over reliance on the corporate buzzwords. I think that they can I sometimes I cringe when I hear myself use them, and it's inevitable, we start to do them. And I think with candidate experience, it can become corporate buzzword. It can become a little
Yes.
bit meaningless if you're not really applying it in a way that's impactful. And for my team, I think when we think about candidate experience, it's really what the candidate walks away with and what they're saying to their friends. What are they saying to their community or their neighbors? So from the moment that they start interacting with our company, all the way through getting their interview scheduled, having their interview, and then the follow-up and the interactions that they have with the recruiters throughout that process, that's what we would want that to be a great experience that the candidate walks away from feeling really good. And I think when you're talking about candidate experience, it's hard to really know what makes it great, but it's very easy to know what makes it bad. And for me, I think the things that kill a good candidate experience are a long time to get back to the candidate, having responses that are meaningless or templates that don't have any, real direct tie to the candidate, and then just having like getting ghosted. And I think those are the things that most candidates will complain about, or will make them feel like, oh, I was really excited about this job, but then I had a terrible candidate experience because of one of those three things happened, or even all three. I don't think it's ever a situation where the recruiter is like bullying or calling names or, doing anything really like outright cruel. But typically what will happen is the candidate will have a good experience because they've heard back, they've had something personalized, and they felt like they were really seen and valued. And that's what we want every candidate to feel, like they've gone through an experience that meant something to them. For me, the bar is, I feel like the bar has gotten very low. Like a lot of people are just delighted to hear back in any capacity.
Yeah.
And we don't want to just take that and just say like, oh, well, at least we got back to them. We want every candidate, and I know you and I have talked about this, we want every candidate to have an experience where they felt heard and valued, and that they felt like they had some meaning, and that they don't just feel like a number.
Yeah, nice. And it's really funny you say that, because I recently received, and we'll talk about kind of tracking and trying to record experience over this conversation, but a couple of days ago I had someone feedback that it was the first interview they had in a while where they felt respected as an individual and an applicant, and judged solely on their skills and experience as well, which for me feels very, very normal. But I was amazed that people aren't getting that experience everywhere. It's really interesting to hear you talk about feeling that the bar's possibly a little bit low at the moment, and I don't disagree with any. I agree. Let me don't say I don't disagree. I completely agree with everything you said about the definition of the candidate experience. And I think what people find really easy to forget is it's not necessarily about the one person who accepts the job. Yes, of course, we recruit to fill positions. The chances are the person who accepts your job is going to have a great candidate experience. And I think if you can shift your mentality when thinking about the candidate experience to focus on that, all those other people who didn't get the job, but them having a positive experience, says a lot more about who you are and how you do things than just the one person who has a great experience. Does that make sense?
Absolutely, 1,000%. I couldn't agree more. I think that's where candidate experience can get a little bit muddled, where people focus so much on the end goal and that result, and they're just focusing on getting to the finish line and saying, oh, we want to have, this great candidate that we've come across and we've met, and we see them working at this company, so we're going to roll out the red carpet for them. And then there's all of these other candidates, and if they don't have that good candidate experience, that's really that's so much more of the majority of the experiences that people are having. So many more people have an experience of applying for a job and not getting the job. And if you just look at hiring ratios, there's probably going to be, for one of our roles, we have thousands of applicants. We probably screen, a few hundred, and then we make a selection of, for some of these roles, maybe 5 or 6 throughout the year. And we're getting so many applications right now because of the economy and people, that are job hunting. There's I think a little bit higher number of applicants, But for all of those people, that's who we need to be focusing on, is that candidate experience that those hundreds of people are going to be having. And of course, we do want to get the end result. We do want to get the hire. We want the person to be part of our team. But for everybody else that we're interacting with, they should still feel just as valued and still walk away, walking away to their community and talking about having a great experience and a great interaction with our company. And I think too, when you're looking at like the total package, that pays off so much. That investment in a good candidate experience with those hundreds of people, it continues to pay off, because that becomes your talent pipeline, that becomes your talent pool, that becomes the people that you can go back to later. And there's so many like myriad ways that those people end up coming back to you. And I have like hundreds of stories, maybe not hundreds, maybe dozens of stories where people have come back and it's because, they had a good experience and they didn't get the job, but they were declined well and they felt valued and they told their friend or they told their neighbor, and then we ended up hiring that person, and that person ended up being a really difficult hire or a really key, person that was going to be making a huge game-changing moment in our company, and we got them because we had declined somebody else well.
Yeah, there's a magic. I was reading a book recently and they were talking about there's a magic data point, which is referrals of people who've been unsuccessful in your recruitment process. And the fact that if people haven't had the positive experience, the positive outcome, sorry, not positive experience, haven't had the positive outcome that they wanted, but they've had a positive experience along the way and are still happy and comfortable and able to recommend you to other people. It's just it's utilizing a specific access to talent that I can guarantee all those people who have a very low bar for the experience aren't able to tap into in any other way.
Yeah.
We'll talk about human touch shortly, but I do want to talk about automation, because we can't do the candidate experience all by ourselves, right? So you touched on automation a little bit earlier, Erica. What are you automating now? Can you share that with us?
Yeah, so every person who applies will hear back from us instantly. They'll instantly get like an auto email that says, we've received your application. For many of our positions, we actually have like a couple of different automations and triggers. So we do phone screening, and a lot of that can be pretty automated, where if we move them to this stage, they're going to get an automatic email that asks them for their calendar time, and they can set up a time on our calendar to do the phone screen. We have a lot of the like we pre-screen pretty hard. we do a lot of pre-screening before they get to the manager, and we're fortunate to be able to do that because we have a good team. But we will set up a lot of those pre-screens fairly automatically. And as an example of that, we might say, that this role pays this amount per hour. Is this an okay amount for you? If yes, then, you can kind of go here, and that's kind of automatically sorted for us. Some other things that are automated are with our scorecards and our notifications. So a lot of our systems are built to notify managers when they have an interview, what the interview is going to be about, and what the next steps will need to be from that manager perspective. So the manager knows here's the resume, here's the person that they're meeting with. And then they also know, like, I have, this amount of time to get my notes in. And we have, kind of notes in there that say, as soon as this happens, this other thing will automatically happen, so that the manager is aware of where they are in the process, and they're not the bottleneck for any of those processes either. And for one of my roles, we are very, very process oriented. When we can only hit the numbers and the times that we need to hit if everything moves according to plan. So we have to have all of these things happen automatically. And if we're stopping and hemming and hawing over, what happens here, it muddies the whole process up, and it ends up having a really dire impact on how the rest of the team's hiring projections look. Like, it helps us to have this process that's so oriented around, once the person's interviewed, then they get this notification. Once the notification has gone out, this happens, and it's really well structured.
Nice. So automation for you, excuse me, is providing information for candidates and hiring managers during the process, but it's also to allow the flow of communication as well. Once this happens, this is going to happen, and it ensures that process is following the process, right?
Yes. You said that so much better than me. Thank you very much for distilling everything down and really helping to clear up what we were talking about. Absolutely.
No, well, I appreciate the detail you gave. Honestly, it's helpful, because the reason I asked that is because we're quite lightweight on our automation. We see the value of it. We've got we have an ATS, of course, which does our, as you say, the thank you for applying emails and things like that. We have our scheduling solution for very efficient hiring and speeding the process and the experience as well. But I'll also use, I use AI to transcribe some of our interviews for training and note taking, which is something that I might come back to a little bit later on. But it's for me, solutions like that are allowing our managers to focus on having the conversation as opposed to making notes on the conversation. So for me, our tools are about improving the experience of those parties, not necessarily the process. And I think we're a smaller, evidently much smaller organization than you. So the nature of those conversation lines are probably a little bit shorter than perhaps yours. So I understand the importance of that process and how automation is working for you in that sense. Tell me, does it work 100% of the time for you?
It definitely doesn't. And actually, one of the things that we're looking at is how AI will interact with that. And we've started to look at different processes and tools that where it would make the most sense for that to help us. It definitely doesn't work 100% of the time. And I think that's what kind of leads into our other section about, the human touch. But for any machine or anything that can be automated, there's still a necessary human element of it. And I think one of the things I had been thinking about when I was, what does an ATS do? And what does, these automatic like calendaring tools use? And we have all of these automated, like pre-screening tools that kind of sort people and pull characteristics out about people. And for me, I was kind of thinking of like the metaphor of like a washing machine, like you still have to have somebody sorting the laundry. You still have to have somebody putting the laundry in. They just don't have to spend all of those hours and hours and hours that before the invention of a washing machine, would have been spent actually cleaning the clothes. But there's still a person who's involved, and there's still a person who's doing a lot of the thinking part of it. They just don't have to do that part that takes a long time. And so it's making things faster, but it's not taking away from, that there's still a person doing this thing. There's still people at both ends of it that are making sure that things are working according to plan. And we've had so many instances of, we put the wrong notes on the wrong candidate. We put the notes, we've moved this person to a stage they weren't ready to be at yet. And so then they got scheduled for a final before they'd even had their first. And all of those kinds of things happen so often. And sometimes it does feel like, oh, we've over automated because there's all of these things happening and we're having to go back and like trace through the process and figure out where that error happened and troubleshoot it. And we're using all of our corporate lingo to unravel the mess there.
Yeah, easy to do, isn't it? I can recall an occasion it's a really simple one, but a candidate who I was super excited about, who we moved to, I think, the second stage of the interview process. I sent the scheduling link over, and then there was other things going on. We've got other interviews and other jobs to fill and other demands of the role, and you can go, where's that candidate gone? They haven't booked it in. And the long and short is they've just missed the email, or it landed in their junk, or they were on holiday for a week and just missed it, and they were just stuck in the process of, I've moved to this stage but haven't organized this stage. And it's that, like you say, nice washing machine analogy, little bit of attention to ensure that there is no candidate that's left behind, and that personal touch, which we'll cover, really, 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 really contributes to the candidate experience. I'm making sure that although automation is doing all this amazing work for me and saving me all this time and allowing me to do these really important things, I'm making sure that that's happening, and a little bit of work under the bonnet, right, makes the difference. You talked about over automating. How do you stop yourself from over automating? There's these shiny tools out there that are going to change your life and improve the recruitment process and half your time to hire. They're all out there. How do you stop yourself from over automating?
That's such a good question. And I feel like I get a lot of pitches and, you know, invites for solutions to things. And I think you have to have a really good understanding of what the process is, and
Nice.
knowing what like focusing on having people do what people do best, and having, a machine do what a machine does best, and having a clear sense of what those two things are. And I think really defining what you can't have offloaded. And I think that changes all. I don't think that there's a silver bullet answer that's always right, because I know, in the past, like, you thought, oh, like scheduling is something that has to happen from a person, because you have to be, talking about different events, and you have to be talking about different times. Like, that's something that you have to have a conversation to do. And now we have that. So it's so easy to, like, you can use Cronofy, or you can use like other tools to automatically set up a lot of these calendar invites that we in the past wouldn't have even conceived of. Like, that would have seemed impossible. But I think that that's always shifting. And then having a lot of respect for what people uniquely are capable of doing, and letting that part stay and shine. And for us, I think it's just making sure that we always have a focus on the candidate experience. And if it's ruining the candidate experience at any point because it's become over automated, then that's probably what our symbol would be, or what our signal.
Yeah, nice.
And
nice having that real focus. Sorry, did I interrupt you then?
No, I just was going to ask. I saw a question in the chat, and also I had the same question as this person in the chat about what AI transcription service you use, because we were just having a meeting about it and talking about different tools, and I was a little bit intimidated about which ones to use.
So thank you, Beth. Right, thank you, Beth, for the question. So the tool that we use is called MetaView, and we use it for a couple of reasons. So it's really, really lightweight. I really don't need to. I don't want to be selling it. It's not. This is not the platform to be selling it. But we add it to our Zoom calls. So when an interview, the candidate has to consent and can opt out of it as well. But it just turns up in the interview, and when the interview's finished, I get an email which says, hey, here is the transcript and here's the recording as well. So what I'm using it for now is the AI gives me recommendations. So it says, hey, you asked this question, which is a closed question, and you could have asked it like this in a more open question. Or it says, you asked this stacked question when you should have split them in. So it gives me really nice advice. But what I'm using it for is so I don't need to make notes, so I can focus on the conversation. And I'm starting to take now our hiring managers are using it, and I'm starting to take some of those recordings and produce training material for our hiring managers as well. So I'm still at early days with this journey, but my plan is to sit in kind of coaching sessions and say, look at this question that this candidate asked, how would we respond to that? Or look at the way that this hiring manager asked this question, how could we have asked that better? Or look at this answer, how could we follow up with a question to get more insight? So it's twofold for me. It's streamlining my ability to do better interviews, it's improving my interviewing technique, and it's providing some real training material for it as well. So yeah, thank you for that. Good question.
Yeah, we were working on that as well, and I think asking a lot of the same questions. And I love that it's able to help you craft better questions, because that's something that, it's a skill like anything else that you're kind of always improving, is I've asked questions and then I can tell by the way that the candidate answers that the question wasn't clear and it wasn't helpful and it's not going to get me the answer and it's put the candidate in maybe an awkward spot. And so I am always trying to figure out and like tweak, and it's nice that we have tools that can help with that as well.
Yeah, I agree. And it's funny because I was talking to someone. I keep starting this with, I was talking to someone the other day, or the other day this thing happened, but it is true. Honestly, the other day I was talking to someone about, I really feel that there's this old school mentality that interviews are designed to catch a candidate out. Do you remember the whole "sell me this pen" thing?
Yes,
Going back a long
absolutely.
time now. But I
Yeah.
really feel that there's this expectation that I'm a new hiring manager or I don't have much experience with interviews. My job is to try and catch them out and ask them questions to make them think on their feet and see how their reactions are. I just don't think people work like that. I don't think that's a fair way to assess how will this person perform in a role where they have context, where they have context, sorry, and they know where their job is going, they know the strategy and objectives of the organization and what we're trying to achieve. And I feel that the more prepared I can be, the more prepared a candidate can be, the more information we can give, the more we can help someone to prepare, the more likely they are to do better in the interview as well. And therefore, we're going to make better decisions. So yeah, good interviewing is really hard, really hard.
Yeah, so we do an interview training at Bamboo, and one
Nice.
of the things we talk about in that is that we're trying to find the best person for the role, not the person who's the best at interviewing. And a lot of times you can get confused that the person who's the best at interviewing is going to be the one that you need to hire. But there's so much about interviewing that makes people uncomfortable and it puts them on the spot, and it's a really awkward process for many people. And what can we do to help eliminate that awkwardness and really to make the person have a better experience, have a better candidate experience. And I completely agree. I think if you can be really clear at the outset of what you're looking for and what the goal of this is and what qualities you're looking for, it helps the candidate to be much more open and I think to be more authentic if this is going to be a
Yeah,
good fit.
nice.
And it really should be a mutual. Of course, you're going to have a little bit more power as the interviewer and as the company, but really both people should be opting in and deciding if this is going to be a good fit, because you don't want to hire a bunch of people who are fantastic interviewers, but are miserable in the job. And then you have turnover and then you're just replacing those people. And so
Yeah.
we've gotten really, like, I think that's one of the things that stood out to me the most when I first interviewed as a candidate with BambooHR, that they essentially did what you were just describing, of saying like, this is what to expect in your next interview. These are the kinds of things we're going to be looking for. This is what, our vision is for this conversation, and it's to be authentic and genuine so that we can really get to know you and not how good you are at gaming the system. And I think a little bit of that was because they thought, well, you're a recruiter, you'll probably know a lot about how to be interviewed very well. Which
Yeah,
I don't know
nice.
if that's true. I think interviewing is hard for anyone, even if they're a recruiter.
It is, yeah, really hard, really, really hard. Especially it's hard to talk about yourself sometimes, isn't it? One of the things that I've done is one of the kind of core words of things that we talk about at Cronofy is the importance of transparency and truth. So I created a documents page which lays out interviewing with us. So it of course talks about the process, but it also says and this is our assessment criteria, and this is, you talked about the evaluation form before, so I say, well, here's our evaluation form and these are the questions we ask, and this is our rating criteria, and these are the things that we're going to be asking you about, and this is why we're asking that, and these are our principles and the things that are most important to us, and this is what alignment with that looks like. And we also talk about that, and this is the dress code and everything, and laying all that out, I noticed it was hard. I couldn't measure it specifically in terms of numbers, but I noticed a higher quality of interviews and candidates progressing through to further stages of the interview process. We weren't wasting time, isn't the right word, but we weren't using up time in the interview saying, and so what's the process now, and what's the dress code, and those questions which I can now really easily answer before the interview takes place. But what I'm allowing candidates to do is prepare for what we're looking for, so they can bring their best self to interview. So the questions that they give, this is the best of me, and we can fairly compare that with other candidates who've said, well, this is the best of me, and we can make the best assessment. We're not risking someone being unprepared because they didn't have all the information, or needing all the information to be able to prepare properly. And that, you know, that contribution to the candidate experience has led to us making better decisions across the interview process. And I think we've had some great feedback on it as well, which has been really helpful.
Yeah, I'm so glad that you've had that same experience. And I think it helps the candidate have a great candidate experience. It also helps the hiring manager have a much better interview. And we've had similar feedback. That was a pretty big shift for us to go from, trying to just, run through a script of all of these different questions and try to get through as many questions as possible and pack it into an interview, and then shifting that instead to be more about, okay, let's, these are the few attributes that we want to really focus on, and we're going to telegraph it to both people at the beginning, so that, like you said, then you were assessing the candidate, all of these candidates who have really felt like they've had an opportunity to share their best version of themselves. And the managers have just been like overjoyed by the kinds of candidate conversations they're having. And it's helped us to build a lot more trust with our hiring managers, because they feel like, oh, we have a better sense of what they know, that their recruiter knows what they're looking for. They know that their recruiter is helping to prepare the candidates. And so then, like you said, you're not spending time that could be more meaningful having these conversations. And I think that actually is the same motion of what we were talking about with automating. If you have these things like kind of taken care of already, then you're more free to focus on these more meaningful, kind of meaty topics that move the needle for everybody else. And I think that's where we want to be pushing things towards.
Yeah, nice. I completely agree. The quality of the conversation, not necessarily the number of conversations either, as well.
Yeah.
We can all probably think of companies that will have 10 interview processes along the way, because why do 10 when you can do one really, really well, right?
Yeah.
We touched and we've danced a little bit around kind of human touch points as being a really, really, I think for you and me, Erica, a non-negotiable when it comes to a really great candidate experience. Let me ask you this. Do you think that human touch points in the recruitment process speed up or slow down the recruitment process?
That is a great question. I think it can go both ways. I think when it's the right point, when you have a really good process, and then you're balancing, a good system and a good process with more meaningful human touches, I think that it really does make the process go a lot quicker and a lot smoother. Not just that one interview process, like from start to finish of that candidate, but also the hiring process. You're not having to rehire people, because more genuine and authentic connections with the candidates along the way. So that this candidate, you have a better chance of this candidate being a good hire and working out when you have the right touch points. I don't think, having like a lot of, messy interactions just to have them is necessarily helpful. And one thing that and I would actually love to hear your thoughts on this. We've been trying to figure out like the best way of declining people and if it's better to do that over the phone and have like a conversation about why somebody's been non-selected, or if it's better sometimes to have that be another step of automation, and then instead to focus on, more time spent interviewing or more time spent preparing candidates. We've heard feedback on both sides of it, and so we're still kind of weighing out which one is best. I think my instinct had always been, oh, call people, make the call, make the phone call. But it seems like now, I think a lot of people, they see the phone call and they think I've got the job, and it can be harmful potentially to now be kind of in this longer conversation that's really heavy. And so I wanted to hear what your thoughts are on that. And I probably just derailed the conversation, but when I was thinking of human touch points, that's what I've been thinking about, that element of it. Another thing though is we used to rely on people to do things like scheduling interviews. And so that was where a lot of our human touch points were happening, was, you know, calling somebody to say, you did a great job on your interview, we're ready to set up the next interview. And now a lot of that has been more streamlined and more automated. And so instead we're having like a conversation that's much more intentional about, hey, we're calling you not to set up the interview, which you already know when that's happening, but instead to prepare you for this interview and give you kind of like better insight and kind of giving you better questions.
Nice. So just want to make sure I understand your question, because you said you'd be interested in my thoughts on something. Are you talking about specifically reaching out to candidates during the recruitment cycle, you know, phone versus email, that side of things?
Just for declining a candidate. If you've got a candidate made it to the end of the process and they're not going to be the one that we are hiring, you feel it's better.
It's a really good question. I think generations are different. I think, and I'm making a very sweeping statement here. I can't remember if there's something you and I were musing on the other day, but I think the generation entering the workforce now don't want to receive phone calls. I think they prefer the message functionality of it. And I also think when it comes to delivering difficult feedback, or constructive feedback is probably a better word to do, I think there are more people who prefer to see it written down so they can digest it.
Yeah.
So when it comes to us turning candidates down, what we say, and I think you guys are the same with us, if you've had a conversation with someone at Cronofy, you will get a personalized email explaining why you've been unsuccessful from the last person you met as well. So on a grander scale, it's allowing our hiring managers to practice giving better feedback, which is super important to us. But it also gives us the opportunity, by writing it and sending it over email, to really make sure we're being clear and provide the evidence and leave nothing unknown. These are the things that you did really, really well in the interview. This is the reason why we won't be progressing with you. And actually, we want to give the candidate something constructive as well. And here's something, you know, this is something you did really well that you can take into a new interview, to your next interview. Or, do you know, you had a habit of doing this, or you get answered in these types of ways. And I think that if you'd have done it this way around, it would have allowed you to let this part of your experience shine better. So for us, we tend to do it in writing. But saying that, today, I called a candidate to give them some feedback because it was some very, very, very specific feedback that I personally wanted to deliver over the phone. It's my personal experience, really. That hasn't answered your question at all, has it?
No, it absolutely has. And I really like that perspective. I think that is a really interesting, and we don't do anything like that. And I haven't heard of a company that does it. So I really appreciate it. I think it's really, it's a really fresh approach to have the last person that you spoke with be the one to craft and write that. A lot of times when there's tension between recruiters and hiring managers, a lot of times that comes from the hiring manager and the recruiter are having different experiences with a candidate. And if your recruiter is always the one who's giving feedback to the candidate, they don't have all of the information. So they'll say something like, I've had that experience where I've given a candidate feedback about why they're not moving forward, and they want to discuss it or push back or understand more or defend themselves. And having not been in that interview or having not had that exact conversation that had led to that decision, it's harder for me to give more meaningful feedback because I only know as much as the manager told me. And sometimes the manager, just it hasn't had time to share as much because we haven't been using our AI transcription to get their notes on it. But having the recruiter, maybe give some feedback, but having the manager kind of crafting that feedback, I think it eliminates a lot of that friction that you feel from the recruiter going to the manager saying, why are we declining this person? And then also from the recruiter and the candidate saying, this is why we're declining you. I know a lot of times we might fall in love with a candidate and then they end up not getting selected. And so it's almost like devastating for us too, to have to deliver that feedback.
Yeah, it's tough.
But having the hiring manager or whoever the last person that spoke to that candidate was to create that and kind of
And I think,
pull that out. I think it's so helpful. It's so smart.
yeah, it allows us to if the hiring manager can't be specific on exactly why someone isn't right for the role, then they're not being then that hiring manager isn't interviewing properly. There's something there that they're not finding out. Either they don't understand the role that they're looking to hire for properly, they didn't delve deeply enough into the candidate's experience to be able to articulate exactly what was right and what wasn't right. So there's an opportunity there for me to provide training and upskilling and make sure that all of that's correct, and then you learn from that and you make sure you don't do that next time round. But at the same time as well, there's a huge contribution to the candidate experience. Yeah, it's hard work. It's an effort for our hiring managers to do, and particularly for hiring managers who aren't as used to providing feedback as in their previous roles as maybe they would with us. It's awkward and it's sticky and it's difficult and it's hard. it's uncomfortable, right? But it makes us absolutely sure that we know what we're hiring for, and it means that when we can find the right person, there's a lot more agreement. There's a lot more. We all know why this is the right hire. It helps, but yeah, it's hard work. It is hard work. It's just about being absolutely crystal clear. And yeah, sometimes people push back. It happens, of course. But if we're clear, that's all we can do, is be completely honest and transparent with people.
And that's such a good gift for that candidate to get that. Do you feel that a lot of times your managers are, like you mentioned that, it's an uncomfortable or unusual experience for them. Do you feel like it can delay or push out the time if they're, maybe procrastinating or trying to really make sure that they're finding the right words? Does that end up creating any kind of delay or lag?
That's a brilliant question. So we do hold ourselves accountable to fast feedback. What we'll often say to candidates is something like, I don't know, you'll hear back from us in 48 hours, but we'll get back to you. We'll aim for 24 hours or something like that. But I think probably a good example is there was a time when we had an applicant who it was really, really hard for us to give feedback on, because they ticked a lot of areas of the box. They ticked a lot of boxes for the role, and the hiring manager wasn't sure. But that's what we have our evaluation form for. It's what we have, more people involved in the interview process to provide that kind of diversity of opinion as well. So that actually it ended up with a kind of wider conversation to make sure it was right. One of the other things, our approach to recruitment is we interview until we find the right hire. There's a lot of businesses, and I'm not saying one is right and one is wrong, but I know a lot of organizations will say, okay, we need 50 people at first stage interview. We're going to whittle that down to 25 for second stage, and then we want to get, 8 people through to final stage, and we'll make a decision of those 8. That assumes that one of those 8, or that initial 100 or whatever, is the perfect applicant. So we've had recruitment processes where we've had a very small number of people through, but that's because we've been able to identify the perfect person at the end. And you're right, we're going to offer you the role, but sometimes it takes us longer to hire for. So what it means when it comes to being able to provide feedback, we can do it quite quickly, because we can quite quickly identify either we're going to offer this person a role or we're not. And if we're not, we need to be absolutely clear on why. If we're absolutely clear on why, then we should be able to feed that back very quickly to our applicants. Therefore, not waste their time, not give them a week of thinking, didn't I could have asked that question better. Again, it's providing a better experience, but we're moving through the process because we have to, because we need to hire for positions. So do our competitors who are hiring for similar types of roles, for example. Does that match with how you guys do things?
So we do a little bit of both, and I think it depends on the type of role as well. But I think we will have some positions, like we've got a couple of positions that I'm thinking of right now that we were absolutely looking for this really specific person, and we weren't going to make a hire until we found that candidate that had this unicorn candidate that had everything we were looking for. And so in that case, I think we did we did a very similar process where we were, moving through, making decisions quickly, but keeping the posting open and kind of keeping the search open until identifying that perfect person. But then a lot of our other roles that are maybe more like more evergreen roles, or roles that are kind of filled in a higher capacity, for those ones, a lot of times we are going to do that kind of funnel approach. And we actually have like a visual funnel that we we use in our data to say, like, we took it from here. And we try to get that ratio down. We want, if it was 100 applicants to one hire, we're trying to whittle that down, and, trying to get it a leaner statistic there. But we will sometimes do that process of we've got 100 people at this stage, we now need to get it down to 50, and then we get it down to 25, and then from that 25, we're going to be able to make our hire. We definitely have roles that are like that, and I think that that's to be expected, that different roles will have different, have a different kind of process. When there's the roles that are more systematic, or more frequent, like more seasonal, maybe those roles can almost be harder, because you're going to have a lot of, like, sometimes it's just a timing issue. Sometimes it's not even, like, we don't really even have feedback. We've just already hired enough people and we don't have a spot for you now. We'll have to put you in a talent pool, and that feedback can be really difficult to give. But that's a lot of the times the feedback that we do end up telling people is it just was a timing issue. It was nothing personal.
Yeah. Nice.
We do have some candidates, or not some candidates, some of the people on our team who will find, some of they found and identified, like, what are some common things that people are getting declined for, and then giving them, like, either articles or like LinkedIn learning links to say, this is something that we've identified a lot of candidates are, not getting, and we want to give you this, these tools and these resources to kind of give them a more tangible action after their feedback, so that there's not that, oh, now what? But instead there's something that's, like, actually concrete that you can take an action on. And that's been, actually, we've gotten a lot of really great feedback from candidates about those kinds of declines.
Amazing. And the success story, I'm guessing, is going to be when someone comes back to you in a year or so and says, I went on that LinkedIn session, I learned this, I got into this role, I developed this experience, and now I'm back. I'd like to get a job with you guys. That's the dream, right?
That's the dream. And especially, I know we've had a couple of stories like that, where we had a position, then we were able to fill it in like 10 days flat, because we'd already had 2 or 3 candidates that we had talked to in the past that the timing hadn't been quite right, or there'd been some kind of not quite right thing at that time that has now worked itself out. And so, 6 months later, a year later, things have changed, and they are a great candidate, and they've been able to get the position. And for them, it was amazing, because they were able to take action on some of the feedback we gave them. And for us, it was amazing, because now we have this need that was quickly hired and quickly filled, and allowed us to move on to other roles.
Amazing. You talk, I really love your passion for giving that feedback to candidates, and I'm in the same boat and agree with you wholeheartedly. What about hiring managers and feedback? So how would you give feedback to hiring managers?
Oh, that's a really good question. And I think it depends. I mean, for us, a lot of times we try to have that relationship right at the very beginning. We do a lot of pretty thorough intake at the beginning, at the outset of that search, and say, what are we looking for, and kind of setting expectations that we're going to, about how long it might take, or what are some of our best practices for the timelines. A lot of times too, with those intake meetings, we will give them the expectation that we're going to have a wider net at the beginning, and then the more feedback that they give us, the more close we'll get to exactly what they're looking for. We've had to give feedback. I mean, even just like the other day, we gave feedback that the process that they were, that they were taking, they were basically taking too long. They were kind of dragging their feet a little bit. And so we were, kind of looking at like, this is the expectation we had set at the beginning. And because we had such clear expectations at the beginning, we were able to refer back to that. And so the feedback wasn't as much, you're doing this thing that you don't know you're doing. It was more like, hey, remember when we wanted to do this? Let's go back and let's try and do this again. But I think having a really good relationship with a hiring manager by building trust and knowing that you're there to bring them somebody who's going to help them and who's going to help their team, and having that kind of like, it's a shared goal. I know this is going to be my corporate speak that I hate to do, but being aligned on your shared goals, that can really make a difference for how the feedback is received. Because if you're saying, I'm trying to hire somebody really quickly, a lot of friction there, but when the feedback is coming into, we really want to hire this person and we both want this person to land so that your team can be successful, so that our company can be successful. We share this is something we both have in common. How can we do that? What are some things that I can do to help, make sure that this is happening? I think that the feedback can be a lot better received at that point, just by having a clear goal that you're working towards.
Yeah, that's nice. And that kind of rings with my thoughts around obviously the trust, but the mutual respect for the value that individual is going to place on that part of the process. So for me, the lowest hanging fruit example is for us, often a lot of new hiring managers will tend to put specific years of experience on job descriptions. Let's say I need 4+ years experience of this. And I'll often say, well, what if it's 3? What if someone has 3 years? And they'll say, oh yeah, we'll still consider it. So we'll take it off the job description then. Don't say you need 4 if you're willing to take less than 4. Just put on the job description what you're looking for. But on the other end of the scale, a hire we made not too recently was a brilliant candidate who, over the course of a few interviews, we realized that they offered so much more than the role we were hiring for. And it was one of our hiring managers who identified this, and that the feedback that they gave was, this person is more than we're looking for. They're not just have the role, but they could bring more to this position and this department and this business. But I didn't have that depth of knowledge of that department and that role to be able to make that assessment. So we ended up offering that person a bigger job than we'd anticipated, which has been a real success story for us. But without that kind of feedback loop, without that constant communication, and without the process being in place to make these types of assessments, that trust meant we were able to make proper assessments and find the right person for what we didn't know was that job at the time, but was the right person for the business. So yeah, trust and communication, I think, is massive, right?
Yeah, that's a great example and a great story. We had one recently where we were hiring for an entry-level role, and they were asking for several years of experience. And so we had to give that feedback. If it's an entry-level role, they can't have this many years of experience. They're counteracting, you're kind of asking for one thing and expecting another. And we were able to do it with a little bit of humor and not too much tension, but it was me being able to know the job description and the market and have a good understanding of what they were looking for to be able to give that feedback, and for them to be, kind of confident that I was looking out for their best interest and for the company to know that I'm not just, trying to quibble over details, but instead, like, this is very intentional feedback that's going to lead to a better result.
Do you think, and when I ask you this question, I'm referring to the candidate experience, TAs, hiring managers, everyone involved in that side. Is there ever a reason not to give feedback?
Oh, that's also a really good question. You're really good at this. You're very good at asking.
I'm not trying to put you on the spot, I promise.
So I think that there can be times when feedback isn't helpful. I think when you're giving a candidate feedback that they can't apply, there's not anything that they can do. I think that can be detrimental, and I think it can erode trust a little bit, because they're kind of like, well, what am I gonna, what do I do with this? And I think that putting yourself in the shoes of a candidate who's, you know, maybe facing a lot of rejection or facing a really difficult job search, to kind of get feedback that's not anything that they can apply or really take an action on, can sometimes, you know, dampen their hope or, you know, their enthusiasm for their job search. And I think for managers too, if they're being told, you know, I think sometimes the managers do need to hear that what they're looking for isn't, you know, necessarily possible. Like, we're not necessarily going to be able to find a candidate with, you know, this many years of experience with an entry-level salary, but we might be able to make some adjustments here and there to get what you're looking for. And sometimes I think that like that can be almost like a cop out. And so you have to be really careful with how you give that feedback to a manager, because sometimes what the manager will hear is, I'm not going to try and find this person for you. I'm not going to give this a good search. So I think that feedback, if it's true, then it can be really helpful. But sometimes I think I've had that experience where a manager just heard, you know, I'm not able to find that person. Like, that's what they kind of walked away with. And it kind of eroded trust a little bit in that moment, because the feedback wasn't what it was my fault that I didn't give good feedback in that scenario.
It's amazing. That's really interesting. And it's interesting you talk about the quality of feedback as well, because I think my attitude of it is feedback should never be given with negative intent. It should always be given with positive intent. And I want to give you this feedback because I want you to improve, hiring manager or candidate or, you know, member of my team as well. I think the times when if you can't justify the feedback, you're not in a position to give it properly. And I think that's something we should reflect on. I talked before about knowing why someone isn't suitable for a role, but at the same time, I think if it's personal, you shouldn't give it either. Hey, we're not going to progress with your application because you were biting your nails in the Zoom call. That's not, you know, it's not right. It's just not good enough. I am conscious of time, and I want to make sure that we're covering everyone's questions as well. Do you mind, Erica, if I jump into the Q&A and touch on a few? Because
Absolutely.
I think we've touched on some topics that have people have been really interested in. So Laura here says, I appreciate Erica bringing up the conflict around a verbal rejection and would love to hear other people's thoughts. In my experience, it can open up potential legal ramifications. Lee's had a similar expression, and we've had an anonymous person mention it. In the US, there are laws and concerns around giving an explanation to a candidate on why you haven't proceeded. So I just wondered if that's something that you could expand on, Erica.
Yeah, there's you do want to be careful of, you know, that you're not rejecting somebody and it's you know, they're in a protected class, or that their feedback is something that could be misconstrued. And you want to be really cautious around that. We tend to have kind of categories of why people are not being selected, and then kind of pulling from those categories. But I think like what I will often do is, if I am calling the person and talking with them about why they're not moving forward, I'll ask them if they're open to feedback, and then I'll give feedback that is really specific to the culture add qualities, like qualities that they, you know, mentioned in the interview, rather than saying, you know, we're selecting this person who has this much more experience than you. We'll instead say things like, I mean, I almost would never, I can't imagine a time when I would say why we selected somebody else, but instead to focus on that person, you know, this individual that I'm connecting with right then, and giving feedback if it's personalized to them and it's really relevant, but being mindful of protected classes and being mindful of anything that's kind of outside of that realm. Like you said, we're not going to say like, we're not selecting you because you know, like had weird fingernails in the Zoom interview, but instead because
weird fingernails.
those weird fingernails. But we would talk more about, you know, this quality that we're, you know, we've identified and that we've, you know, made clear, and it's part of our job description, and then connecting that back to the candidate. Yeah. I also, when I do trainings with managers and like we do an interview training, we talk a lot about going back to the job description. And so if the job description doesn't say they need to have this quality, and then you're non-selecting them, it's not quite fair. And so you really need to be sure that you're looking for the right things in that job description, and pulling out the specific qualities that you're going to be looking for, and making sure that that's clear with the recruiter, so that the recruiter is able to communicate that clearly to candidates.
Nice. It's a really, really nice point. I think, yeah, I'm in a similar boat as well. It's about if you can be absolutely specific enough, and even use the examples as well. There's been times when we've kind of constructed rejection messages to candidates which have said, you said this and your example was this, but what we needed to hear was this. Or that, just to be absolutely crystal clear that there isn't, another reason behind it. And like I say, if our hiring managers can justify that to us as well, then it really, really helps. Another question that was brought up from Helen, and thank you for your question, was around my sharing our assessment criteria. And Helen said, you don't think that giving candidates an outline on the questions to prepare would only make them move past or progress in the interview because they've practiced their answers? Do you know what, Helen? That's a good thing for me. If I said to every single candidate, I'm going to ask this question, you give me your best answer. And if they went away and prepared and prepared and prepared and rehearsed and rehearsed and rehearsed, and then came to me and said, this is my best answer on my best day, using the best of my knowledge, let's say there was 10 applicants, I can take those 10 examples and say, which is the closest to my job that I'm hiring for the experience that we're looking for. Nothing is left uncertain. There is no candidate being left behind. It's accommodating for, let's say, neurodiversity applicants who maybe need a little bit more time to prepare. It's people who don't do well thinking on their feet. Honestly, it's about leveling the playing field for me. And if I need to tell everyone exactly what we're looking for, then we do. And to be fair, I don't share the exact question. I share our assessment criteria, our evaluation form, and the principles of our organization that we assess people against when making a decision. So yeah, hopefully that answers your question there. So thank you very much for that. Erica, anything to add on that? I just went on my soapbox then.
No, I think I completely agree. I think the same thing. I think when we're telling people we're looking for certain attributes, I've had it where I remember I had a candidate, I was asking them if they'd ever received, about their experiences receiving feedback and how they receive feedback back, which kind of comes full circle. And the person just could not think of anything. And they blinked out, and it really kind of turned the interview, which had previously been going really well, it kind of turned it around to now this candidate felt like they were spinning, and they couldn't really recover from that moment. And I felt terrible. I felt like, oh, if I had just given them that heads up, or what could I have done differently to help that candidate? Because I think they were on paper a perfectly great candidate, and they ended up kind of spinning in a direction that wasn't as helpful because they weren't as well prepared. I think that there's some fear from hiring managers that if we give them the answers to the test, then people are going to cheat or game the system. But I haven't found that to be very true. I've mostly had people, feel like they are able to come and present their best selves and kind of show up the best way. But I think if people are going to be dishonest, they'll find ways to be dishonest in any scenario. But I love having more prepared candidates and having candidates that feel like I said, we want people that are the best for the role, not necessarily the most extroverted, best at interviewing people. Because then we would just only hire recruiters. We just have all these recruiters in all these roles. And we wouldn't get all of our, neurodiversity and, just the different personalities that you need to make a team really function well. And some of those personalities you won't find in a standard interview.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. Erica, do you have time for one more question?
Of course, absolutely.
This is from, and we will make this the last one, so thank you everyone, honestly. This is from Christina, who said, in terms of measuring the candidate experience, you and me promised the other day we're going to talk about data, and we haven't. How do you connect the candidate experience at stages of the process with the questions in the candidate experience survey, if any?
Okay.
And I guess, how are you measuring that candidate experience?
So we definitely measure the candidate experience with surveys. It's also with quality of hire. I think we talked about with data that it's hard to track things that you're not measuring. So if you're saying that candidate experience is important, but you don't have a way of measuring it, then how important can it really be? And there, I don't know that there's a perfect way. We do have a kind of a collection of surveys that we use to track and to measure data. So one of them is one from the hiring manager. So the hiring manager can assess their quality of hire. From the candidate's experience, though, we ask them specifically, once they've made it past the first round, what their experience was like. Right now, we've only gotten about 15% of those candidates to respond to the survey, but it has given us a lot of insight into things that are working well that we want to continue to do. So it hasn't given us as much of like a game-changing kind of like, you know, huge area of shifting, but instead it's emphasized what is working and what we should continue to do.
Nice. That's an amazing answer. I would say it's hard to track things you aren't measuring is one of the greatest quotes I've ever heard anyone in recruitment ever say. So well put, very well put. Really, really interesting. That really, really interesting. Thank you so much. I think we've obviously gone over time. So thank you everyone for your question, and I really hope that this was helpful as well. Before I round off, I need to say a huge thank you to Erica for joining me today. It's been amazing getting to learn more about you and how you do things at BambooHR. And hopefully I speak for both of us when I say everyone who's listening here today is welcome to connect with us on LinkedIn and give us a follow. But yeah, I think ready to round it off. Thank you so much, Erica. Thank you for your time as well.
No, thank you. Absolutely. It's been amazing. I'm so honored and pleased to be, part of this chat. And I learned so much from you. Like immediately I'm like going to go back to my team and say like, oh, we got to do this. And this is what, and this is all these wonderful things. But definitely I would love to have people connect with us on LinkedIn. And I feel like we could keep talking for hours. So this has just been
I think you're right. Yeah, absolutely. I could agree with you there. Absolutely. Maybe we'll have to do series 2.
Yes.
If people want it, right? Thank you so much, everyone. Have a wonderful day. Thank you for your time, and hope to see you all again. All right.
Thank you so much. Have a great one.
Thanks, Erica. Bye.